Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is overcoming versus managing. And this is particularly in the context of anxiety or depression or challenges in life. And so we're going to talk about that in a little bit and what it looks like to move into a state of wholeness. So before we get started though, let's take a moment to get present and just sort of bring ourselves here right now. Lots going on over here. So I want to bring myself to be able to be in full connection with you. So let's take a deep breath in through our nose. Hold it and imagine clear, crisp oxygen just flowing into your lungs and into your bloodstream and your cells and nourishing your organs and all of your being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, any stress. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose. And this time, imagine sparkling white light coursing through every molecule of your being, lighting you up inside and moving into the world beyond as we share electrons and molecules with the outside world to connect us universally. And now let's just gently press our palms together and really, really, really softly sort of tickle your fingers against your palms and feel how delicious that is. And just let's be present to the delight of being physical. There are everything that we experience through the vehicle of our bodies. So many of us have a hostile relationship with our bodies without realizing that that is the vehicle through which we experience all of life. So let's see if we can presence ourselves to the pleasure of that too, in the midst of everything else. We kind of take our bodies for granted. So that's not even the topic for today. I was talking to somebody over the past day or so who is struggling with severe depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking. And I actually have spoken to a couple people over the past few days that are really deeply, deeply wrestling with a sense of hopelessness around being able to be normal. And so there was this conversation about being normal, and I'm going to use that, I think, as a topic for tomorrow. But what I want to address today is this idea of, or making the distinction between managing our our symptoms, managing our anxiety or depression or fear, managing that versus overcoming it or transcending it. And this person was asking me if I thought it was possible to overcome these issues, or if it's a case of managing. And rather than a conversation of either or, I think it becomes more a conversation of both and I want to say good morning to everybody. I'm hoping that you're here. I want to thank everybody who is here for joining me this morning, and I hope you'll participate in this conversation, because so many of us wrestle with really difficult emotions, and there's a sense of despair that can set in when you see the same, what looks like the same issues arising over and over and over again, and feeling like you don't know if it's ever going to be different or if you'll ever be normal. And I want to address the expectation around normalcy without diving into that whole concept, because that's going to be fodder for tomorrow. But this notion of um, having life always be happy or always be good or always be up. I don't know anybody that lives life like that. I really truly don't. I and I certainly haven't. And I've had many, many, many dark times in my life, many dark years where I struggled with extreme and severe depression. And I think that over time, what has made the difference, there are many things actually. I've worked really hard to get beyond those places and have done lots and lots of internal work and really work to face the shadow and to release a lot of the patterns, because it's true that depression, anxiety, fear, these are patterned states of body and mind and heart, body, heart, and mind. So, what I mean by that is that we become habituated to the chemical set of, for instance, for me, depression, it was depression. And it was a very familiar baseline state. And along with the experience of those emotions, there were certain chemical balances in my body. And that's why people find success with medication sometimes, because the medication is shifting the physiology. The medication is uh, shifting the chemical balances in the body, and that has an impact of shifting the experience. Now, we also can shift the experience to shift the chemical balance. And there are other things that come into play, for instance, like what we eat and what we're feeding ourselves, and the health of our gut, believe it or not, has a huge impact on our emotions and our mental state, because of the chemistry that is generated from toxicity in the gut. It impacts our neural pathways even. So there are lots of different aspects to this notion of managing these states versus overcoming them. And if you guys are, I would really appreciate it if somebody would put a comment in so that I know that you actually are, that I'm actually able to see comments. I'm here on Restream, and usually I can see the comments, but I haven't seen anything yet today. So if you could say good morning, I would be so thrilled, just to know that I want you to know I'm not ignoring your comments. Anyway, so I think that part of moving to the other side of these states that are can be so deeply oppressive is a management feature. So there are dietary choices that you can make that can support you. There are supplemental choices that you can make to support you. Like I have a very different eating. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate you telling me that you're here. Good morning. And now I know that if there are comments, I can see them. Thank you very much for that. And welcome to everybody else. And good morning, Dido. Thank you also for chiming in. So I know that you guys are here and I can see you. So we're talking about managing versus overcoming or healing or transcending difficult states like ongoing anxiety or depression or fear or even suicidal thinking. And what I'm aware of is that the answer resides on multiple levels. I think we do need to take action to manage our ourselves. And in managing ourselves, we also get to heal and transcend a lot of the experience. So what do I mean by managing ourselves? Well, one is dietary choices, believe it or not, can have a huge impact on your emotions, particularly anxiety and depression, because when we have food sensitivities, it puts our body into a state of emergency, and that can show up with physiological anxiety. It can show up with heart palpitations. It can show up with a physiology that we will name anxiety, which is can be really extreme. So by eating an organic diet. Good morning, Christina. Thank you so much for being here. Um, we can, if we eat organic, we eliminate a lot of the toxicity in our food. If for some people, myself, for instance, I'm gluten intolerant, and when I eat gluten, it has not only a physical impact on me, but it has an emotional impact on me. Like I get thrown into a less than resourceful place. So physically, that we get to manage certain things that can impact us, and in managing those things, when we're able to manage them effectively, it overcomes some of the uncomfortable, difficult emotions, because we don't have them anymore because the chemical set is different. Okay, so that's one way that we can manage ourselves. Another way that we can manage ourselves is by becoming more conscious of our thinking and our self talk and shifting that. And I put that under the category of management, because as we shift our language and our internal running commentary, then we also shift our experience. So I've talked a bunch about the transformative power of language, but a simple example is when we're feeling overwhelmed with all the things we have to do. I have to do this, I have to do that, I don't have enough time, and on and on and on. Shifting from I have to do to I get to do creates a real shift in experience, and therefore it shifts physiology, and therefore it has potential to be relieving some of the stress and anxiety around the overwhelming list of to-dos that we might have. We can also take that to another level, where we can say, I'm blessed to do this thing. And if you can connect to that blessing state, then it also shifts your physiology, it shifts your perception, it shifts the experience of the anxiety, or the fear. We also can shift, and this is all under the managing and maintaining umbrella. We also can practice gratitude. Practicing gratitude, not just as a recitation where we say, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that, but actually connect to truly being grateful for the blessings that we have, which we often take for granted, like being able to breathe, for instance. I've grown up with asthma, so for me, to be able to breathe and take a deep breath, that's a constant source of gratitude for me, or a constant opportunity for gratitude. Christina says, with food, it's also interesting note that as we head into season changes, autumn can bring a general inflammation to the body. So great, Christina. This is also getting back to the physiological management. When we're managing with food, we can be eating things that are inflammatory. And when we talk about fall, particularly where we have deciduous trees. There's lots of mold and mildew, and many people have sensitivities to molds and mildew, and that also can cause inflammation. So connecting with a holistic nutritionist or a functional medicine doctor can really be a wonderful support in terms of the management of these, I'm going to call conditions, even though I don't want to name it as a thing. It's a state, and we're, even with anxiety, there are moments when we don't experience that anxiety. With depression, there are moments that we don't experience that depression. And that's actually an exercise that I've had clients do, is to set an alarm for every hour or every 2 hours to check in and see how you're actually feeling in that moment. Because I know that for myself, and I've seen this in my clients as well, that when there's an experience of depression, the inclination, or anxiety, the inclination is to generalize that and to say, I am depressed, like a state of being. I have anxiety, like it's always there. And when we give ourselves the opportunity to consciously check in, we notice that it's not a constant state. It's not pervasive in every moment. And I see this tendency in so many people, including myself, that in the midst of something, it feels like it's always that way. It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way. And one of the things that has come up over the past few days, hello, Julie, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you're joining us. Thank you for being here. And thank you to everybody else who's joining us. Over the past few days, I've noticed a lot of people feeling extreme overwhelm and extreme sense of, I don't know if it's ever going to get better. So some sense of despair. And Abdul Fattah, I don't know if I said your name right. I hope I did. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you are encouraged. And I so appreciate you joining us. Good morning. So let's think more about this management thing and this feeling of generalizing, so that it feel, or universalizing. Okay, so universalizing, what I mean by that is, when we feel sad, the tendency is to think, I'm always sad, or I'm always going to be sad, or I'm never going to be happy. And what we want to do is to prove ourselves wrong about the universalizing. And by setting an alarm to check in, you can do that. So I had someone who was telling me that they were always, whenever I hear the word always, it's always a red flag. So always a red flag. But I listen more carefully when people say always, because it's a universalizing. So we want to start chipping away at that belief that it's always something. And therefore, setting an alarm to check in is a really good thing. And this person actually discovered that there were moments that they were truly happy, that they were happy, or they were peaceful, or they were bored, or they were all these different feelings that was not a constant. And so as you recognize that things are not always going to be the same, the one thing that we can depend on is change, that starts to help in the management part, which then creates transformation. So Christina says, I've just this week put reminders in my phone, one to be grateful and another for movement reminders. It's such a help, right, Christina? This is a great use of our technology. We have these phones with us all the time. Why not set reminders to ourselves to wake up out of whatever haze we might be in, and pay attention to what's going on for ourselves. And I love that you're using that as a gratitude reminder. Now that's a management strategy. And in the course of that management, the vibration, the frequency of experiencing gratitude in your body is transformative, because you cannot feel a deep sense of gratitude and anxiety or fear or depression all in the same moment. When you're present to gratitude, that's a feeling in and of itself. Christina says it really is. And I can't agree strongly enough. So these management tools that we have to move through and beyond persistent emotional patterns and habits help us to actually heal those things. So I ultimately came to the conclusion that it is a both and. So the management helps in the overcoming. And the answer, can we overcome these things, is yes, because we get to create new habits. So the thing about gratitude is it's not a mental thing. When you really feel that gratitude, what's happening is you're creating a different chemistry set in your body, and you are starting to build a new habit. Depression is a habit. Anxiety is a habit. And I don't mean to minimize the experience of it by saying, oh, it's just a habit, break the habit, go for it. No, it's a physiological patterning also. And so for me, having had lifelong depression, like extreme lifelong depression, my body is acclimated to that as a baseline. And I have worked for years to create new patterns of gratitude, patterns of appreciation, seeing beauty. I have to tell you that for me, that's transformative. When I allow myself to be present to beauty, that shifts my physiology. So by shifting your physiology on a regular basis, you're creating new neural pathways, you're creating new chemicals and in your body, and you are weaning yourself from that other habit. Now, there are times it's sort of like an addiction in a way. I think it is an addiction because it's so deeply patterned. And I'm speaking for myself. And I invite you to explore this as a concept for you as well, to deeply understand this on maybe a different in a different context. Our bodies become habituated to certain chemicals. And so the depression chemicals are really, really familiar to me. And so when I have the right stimulus, or you could say the wrong stimulus, then my body kicks into that familiar place. And now, because I have all these management tools and I've patterned a lot of this management behavior, like gratitude, or like breathing, or like thinking about things differently, I automatically start turning it around, and that shifts my physiology out of that relapse sort of state. And so what it is building a strong enough reservoir of these alternate experiences, so that when the triggers recur that stimulate these behaviors that can be so debilitating, as you start moving into that, it automatically triggers the new behavior, the new pattern, and you move into that. So somebody says something that's real depressing to me, automatically, without even thinking anymore, I look for the opportunity in it. And that was a long practice to get myself to a place where, when something went terribly wrong, wrong in quotes here, I automatically say, what's the opportunity in this? Rather than saying, why me? And there might be a moment of fear, like, oh my gosh, it's going to come crashing down, or something like that. There are moments that comes into play, and my management skills kick in to say, wait a second, I remember that thinking. Now what do I choose in this moment? And recognizing our sovereignty and our capacity to be able to make choices in the moment, that's also another patterned thought and behavior, is to say, what do I choose? What's the opportunity? How can I turn this around? And that's not to say that there aren't times where I just allow myself to feel the feelings. You feel the feelings, feel the reaction, notice that it is a reaction, and compassionately allow yourself to move through that experience. So one of the other things that's a management thing is kind of what not to do. And that is that the tendency, when we get anxious or depressed or fearful or angry or hurt or any number of other emotions, is to beat ourselves up for feeling that way. So not only do we feel bad because we feel bad, but then we feel worse because we judge ourselves and make ourselves wrong for having the feelings we have. And so that's another management thing, is to let go of the judgment, to just recognize what's there, interact with what's there, to transform it, or to be present to it with compassion, because you would show other people compassion, show yourself compassion, because the judgment just makes it worse. And that too is a pattern. So we get to see what our patterns are and cultivate patterns that move us toward the outcomes that we desire for ourselves. And I'm not saying it's easy. It may be sort of simple, but it's not necessarily easy. I get that. I have spent lots and lots of years struggling, and I spent lots of time suffering. And what I realize is that as I pattern myself into recognizing the choice that I have, then I choose not to suffer, and I choose not to struggle, and I choose to be more compassionate to myself. And as I'm able to be more compassionate to myself, I'm also able to be more compassionate to others. And I'm also able to be more free within myself. So are you guys finding this helpful? Are there any new insights that you've heard here that you feel like you can apply in your life? Because I think when we realize that depression and anxiety and fear is a pattern or a habit, and we don't judge it as a habit, we just recognize that it's a habit because we have this sort of chemical physiology or proclivity to move back into this place over and over because it's familiar. Then I think, at least for me and for the people that I'm working with, that I'm having these conversations with, the experience seems to be, oh, it's a habit. If it's a habit, I can break a habit, or I can create a new habit. And it's not that that is transformational talk, it's actually fact. And habits are mental, emotional, and physiological. And some habits are harder to break than others. But if we recognize that it's only a habit, then we can manage it and thereby transform it with different habits, different patterns that we deliberately program into ourselves, that we deliberately practice. And just going back to the idea of the phone, that's a really good way, setting an alarm every couple hours, every hour, maybe even every 15 minutes, to check in and make a choice in that moment to feel something, feel what's there, and then feel something different, if it more uplifting. And Dido says it's very freeing for me to realize that anxiety and fear are habits. Yes. And not to minimize it, but it is a habit. And there are certain habitual ways of thinking, like beating ourselves up. That's a habit. And I realized actually when I was growing up, I had a lot of negative messaging. And when I went away to college, the folks that were giving me the negative messaging weren't there, but I had already incorporated it, and I gave myself that negative messaging all the time. Self hatred, self criticism, self judgment, on and on and on and on. I was always there talking to myself and telling myself how terrible I was. And shifting that habit shifts our experience as well. So, gratitude is one way where we can shift the experience of all that negativity and create new physiological patterns. And as we strengthen those new physiological, mental, and emotional patterns, then we can, here's how it goes. Here's with all the negative self-talk. And then what happens is we build more and more positive and gratitude. And what happens is that there's a displacement. And so the old stuff may or may not be gone, but it is displaced by the positive habit. And so there may be recurrences of the old habit. The thing is, recognize it's a habit. It's not a fact of life. And that gives you then the power to shift it. So I am so delighted that you guys played with me this morning. Thank you so much for that. And I I hope to see you again tomorrow. This is the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin, and we go live. I go live to be with you at 9 a.m. every weekday morning on the Enlightened World Facebook page. And I just love spending this time with you. So please join me again and see what kinds of habits you can start creating today that are life affirming, and let me know how you do. Until next time.